Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the World Wide Web of Lending. I'm at a beautiful location down in the Baltimore area today, filming this episode of the 10-part series, The Harmony Between the Agent and Lender Relationship. Today, we're going to learn about market insights and how a lender and realtor can help you with their experience. And I've got a really cool partner, Janelle, almost here, but I wanted to tell you a quick little tidbit about where we are. I'm down here today in North Point Park. It is a huge part of the War of 1812 historical places. We've had some really awesome moments in our history around the Chesapeake Bay, and this is one of those moments. I'm going to show you some water scenes that actually were involved during the battle or the War of 1812, which eventually led to the creation of the Star-Spangled Banner. So definitely some American themes hidden in today. You know, it's something I'm all about, but I'm excited for you to be here. Can't wait for you to meet my friend Janelle. She'll be here in a couple minutes, and I appreciate you staying tuned. Well, I'm here with my friend Janelle, like I said, and it's a beautiful area here. We picked a perfect day. We've had some really crazy cold weather in Baltimore area recently, but the sun opened up regardless of what the Puxatawny Phil did up in Philly.
That's right.
We're getting some beautiful weather here. Janelle, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell the audience kind of, where you're from. And I know you're not born here, you're a transplant.
That's right.
They'd love to hear that. So let us know.
Hey, everybody. My name is Janelle Brubach. I am originally from the Midwest, Hoosier girl, but I've been here in Maryland longer than I was in Indiana. So I live in the Sparrows Point area. I am married. We have 5 kids between the 2 of us.
Ooh, God bless you.
Yeah, I was a teacher for 15 years in Baltimore County Public Schools, and then I transferred over into the real estate world. I took a lot of what I learned in the classroom, and that's kind of what I apply over here. But I'm with Realty Plus Associates. I've been licensed for 3 years now and loving what I do.
So 3 years ago was 2022, because we're in 25 now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that after kind of the craze?
Oh, it was when the craze was at its height.
Okay, so
yes.
What made you say, hey, I think there's an opportunity in this field? What was the transition?
It was actually a friend of mine at the time. Okay. She knew some of the things that I'd been dealing with in the classroom, and I actually got hurt and was out in physical therapy. And when I got hurt, I just did my class while I was out. I did the real estate class, and then I just hit the ground running from that.
So you were out of class and then got back into class.
That's right.
It's very natural for you.
In class my entire life, will continue to be, because we're always learning. Right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
So you like it so far? I
love it. Absolutely love it. I love the flexibility. I love being able to meet with people.
Yeah.
And just. And I'm still getting my teaching fix, right? Because you're still teaching people the process.
Yeah.
So, it's not, I was once told teachers make the best agents. And, I feel like it was a smooth transition in, and I'm just still doing mine.
So you told me something really cool when we were chatting before this video about your approach to being an agent, which you got from being a teacher. Share that with the audience real quick.
Yeah. So when I was in the classroom, I always had the philosophy and the thought process that I was the teacher that I would want my own kids to have. And so I've kind of transferred that over into real estate. I am the kind of realtor for my clients that become my friends that I would want to have, or I want my kids to have. Yeah. Same thing with the people that I work with. I kind of align myself with people that have the same core values and work ethic and thought process. And, I just very genuine and honest, because that's kind of what I would want to have. So
I almost feel like in the social media craze, the community needs more of that, because, and it's not agents' fault at all, but just the whole digital trend where there's a lack of intimacy with your professionals of any field. But I feel in real estate, there's this weird trend where there's this whole social media image of what a realtor is and what they do. And some of it's funny, but it creates that disconnect. And from what you're saying, that kind of brings us back to just a relationship.
They get me as I am, and they get the goofiness, they get the silliness, they get the honesty, they get that I'm on them like I would be my kids. But I want it to be a fun and relaxing experience. So, and
I feel like that's going to resonate with people because of the unfortunate image in our community, loan officers too, and for real estate, where sometimes the age-old opinion about what we do every day is not true. It's a misconception, and that's cool to hear that, kind of bringing it back to the reality. Well, I appreciate you being here today. We're talking about a pretty cool topic, and as we kind of talked about what we wanted to share with the audience today, it is kind of ever-changing, but we're going over, market trends. And there's some really important things we'll talk about today that I think the audience could benefit from. But the irony is that it changes. And just as you think, as a professional and as a layperson, it changes. So we got to kind of talk about that too.
Yes, very different from when I started to where we are now.
That's a great point. Yeah, 3 years has made a lot of difference.
Yes.
So, all right, let's get into some topics and have some fun.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome.
All right.
So as we kind of drill in real quick, when I say market trends, which can mean something different to the average American versus somebody in the industry, what comes to mind when I bring that up to you?
Definitely the price of the home, price of the home and the days on the market, which coincide with each other, right?
Yeah.
So, as a listing agent and as a buyer's agent, you have two different approaches that you have to take with your clients, right? And, as a listing agent, of course, everybody always wants to list high. They hear, oh, it's a seller's market. Prices are like outrageously above, above. And as an agent, you really have to look at the comps. You have to look at the comps and compare the price to the days on the market, right? So if you're priced here and your days are high, obviously we know that that's sitting longer and we need to kind of adjust a little bit. But, I think what you're hearing and how things were 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even 6 months ago, houses are sitting a little bit longer. We're seeing the days on the market tick up a little bit. So agents, I think really, really, especially for you guys, need to zone in on what the comps say, because appraisers are looking at that, and they're probably, a year ago, you could just do a year's worth of comps and you're pretty much all up here. Whereas in the last 6 months, we're seeing a tick down.
So obviously I deal a lot more with the buyers, but a question for you on the seller side, when you bring up the conversation of comps, and even a layperson knows that means people that have already sold in the area, your market area. I always feel like in my head, some sellers want to be that next high comp. Do you battle that at all on your end?
Oh, of course. So there's always, an approach to it where we can try it. You've got to go in with data. You can't just speak and
whim.
Yeah, no, it's never successful. So if you go in with the data and you show them, here's what's sold, here's the price you're looking at, you might find a house and say, well, here's how many days they're on, and if somebody has a decent amount of time, okay, we can try it. But I always let people know that if we go with the higher price and we get no activity, you don't ever want to chase the market. And by chase the market,
great term.
What we mean is that, you've priced too high and now you're doing price reduction. You're losing time. And then people think, well, what's wrong with the house? Or it might not be anything. It just might have been that, that seller wanted really high profit and that's just not where they are. So having a really solid, realistic conversation with the seller, I think it's vital and makes a big difference.
And so on my side, the market trend for me is obviously interest rates. You don't need to be anywhere near our industry to know that rates aren't really low right now. And then the other thing are just strategies to be able to be competitive in a marketplace. And obviously every seller would love to get an offer with cash. Every buyer, if they had it, would love to be the cash buyer because it's so much power and leverage. But most Americans are not cash buyers. So we've had to develop some things that things have been around for a long time but weren't really used. And I'll talk about the rates for a second. There are a lot of cliche phrases that we could joke and probably even go a couple rounds of like jokes about don't necessarily make your decision on the rates. But ultimately, if you look in the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, there isn't a whole lot of reasons why you should wait if you have a reason to move. Yes, there will be a mathematical difference, but the most recent cliche that I think I just saw last night as I'm laying down and kind of scrolling through social media was that if you were in the 80s and waited for the rates to drop, you might not have bought a home for 14 years. Now, I'm 43, the 80s to me, right? I mean, our average home buyer, I think in 2025 went up to 38 years old, first-time home buyer. First-time home buyer average in America is 38 years old. That makes me feel so bad for anybody between 25 and 35 who are at prime time to make financial decisions. And those people are statistically almost guaranteed to get a better rate at some point. But if they find the house, there's a conversation to be had. And I know right now a lot of people are sitting outside of the marketplace because of their fear for that. But one of the things we do, which I'm kind of bringing it back to the second point, is we've brought back the idea of a recast, and it's not a refinance. And a recast simply means After you have your mortgage and you've made 2 payments, which is 60 days into it, if you come into a lump sum of money, you can recalculate your mortgage payment based on the new balance after you drop the balance. It's not a refinance. You're not changing who owns the home, what the term, the length of the term, and you're not changing the interest rate. But if you sell your home and you add 100 grand to your balance, okay, subtract technically, then it's going to drop your payment down. All that does is be able to provide you with a quick little bridge on that purchase without having the pressure of selling. Because right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, it may be a little easier to be a seller right now than a buyer. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a great product and a great approach, I guess, because there's always this apprehension when you want to buy a new house, but you're like, well, I haven't sold my house. I don't have a lot of cash and things like that. So, the hesitancy to put the house on the market. A lot of times I have people that want to buy a house and they say, well, I don't want to put my house on the market yet because I don't want to have anywhere to go. There are options. You have the recast, you have rent backs, you have, where you can stay. So there are options. So just talk to someone. That, I guess, is a big piece, that recast will, if you have a home to sell or, you're coming into a lump sum of money, there's a limited inventory right now for buyers still. So if you find that house, you don't want to miss that opportunity for that house that might be golden for you, just because you don't have your house sold or you don't have that money yet, because you can recast it and then your payment will come down.
And I'll simply add that when Janelle said talk to somebody, those two somebodies were not Siri and Gemini, which is Apple and Google. Those are actual industry professionals. Open a conversation. I don't know anybody right now off the top of my head, and I wouldn't say their name if I did, but I'd let you know if there was, who's in a real salesy mood right now on our side. We just want to have conversations. We want to know when people are thinking about getting the market. And a lot of people have questions they're scared to ask because they think if they contact a professional in our business, they're going to be pushed into a sell. And that's just not the way it is right now. At least I know it's not for you. It's not for me. And the companies we work for back us up on that. So it's a great point. If you are curious about this information, it's a great time to reach out and just learn so that when we figure out what your time is, you're in control of that, but now you know some of the tricks. And I will say one thing, there is a trend on the lending side of people tapping into retirement assets. I'm not as keen on jumping into that sandbox unless it's an absolute last resort. There are a lot of really good conversations about that, if it exists, how to do it, when to do it. But I would caution people not to immediately say, oh, I'll just borrow from this or that, because there are some tax ramifications that need to be brought in from a tax person. So I would kind of lean away from that trend, because what I'm seeing now on my side is I'm able to show a potential seller from the buyer side the strength of that buyer and show them that we've got a house with 200 grand equity sitting there, but we're only putting 5% down because we don't want to sell first and then buy. And sellers are appreciating that. And it's just about how to phrase that.
Right. And if you're speaking to someone that is pushy, you have to be comfortable in this transaction. It's huge, but it should be very comfortable for you. So if you're feeling like, whoever you're speaking with is being aggressive or, trying to convince you of something that you don't want to do, or you're not comfortable, just know there are people in this industry that are not that way. So it is a misconception that, you're going to be forced and pushed and trapped. There are people that are here for the long haul, is a good way to put it. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, there's a lot of part-time agents, and I saw the statistic, and I'm going to beat up the statistic. I don't know the exact number, but in your field, we both have one. I saw that 74% of agents didn't have a single transaction in 20. Was that right?
That's correct.
Something like that.
It's 74%.
What in the world? That's 3 out of 4 agents in the country.
Single sale.
And if you're talking to that agent, and I'm not putting anybody down because everybody has side hustles, second careers. It's that time in our economy where you got to have a second job. But if you're putting a major transaction like this in somebody's hands and you're feeling a little pressure, it could be because they have a different motivation behind it. I'm glad you said that.
And let me talk to you about trends in the market. There were a lot of changes that happened. And if you are not a full-time agent or you're not keeping yourself, even some full-time agents aren't keeping up with themselves,
That's a great point.
So it is really important to be connected with somebody that knows about the changes. There's a super fun site, addendum that some people I've still gotten contracts.
I didn't know what the heck that was. You told me.
They don't even know what it is.
You're like, Joe, we got to talk about this. And I don't even know what she's talking about.
It's been in place since October of last year. So to be with somebody that's up with the changes that are in the contract is important, because that's a legal binding document, and you want to have somebody that's familiar with what they're doing or submitting an offer that's creative. I had an agent just tell me that we won because I was not a box cookie cutter. I asked them specifically, what is your seller looking for? And tailor the contract to what they need. That's important. Have your agent ask the seller what they are, what are they interested? What's important to them? And there's
What's their hot button?
Yeah, there's a way to tailor it, and even just a tiny small detail, you're letting that seller know that you value what they need while you're putting that offer in.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
And I know that not everybody does that, so that's nothing that makes you special. It's just asking those questions.
Yeah.
It
goes a long way.
It
goes a long way, because you're reaching out and trying to make that personal connection and letting them know, and one thing too, and I'm going to say this for the sake of educating the public, love letters.
Former teacher.
That's what I do. Love letters are not allowed. If you have an agent that's telling you to write a letter, don't do it.
Oh my gosh.
It's still happening. We're still seeing it. It is not allowed. So if you're with an agent that's telling your realtor, that's telling you to write a love letter to the seller, please don't do it.
And real quick, kind of explain for the audience that doesn't know what that term is.
That's just a letter stating how much you love the house, or your history, or just a letter from you to the seller. That communication can't happen. It leads to, it just crosses the line sometimes, and it can be leading. It can, it's not a good idea. And, let the realtors, agents do their job and stay away from that love letter situation. But your agent can tailor the offer so that you're kind of hitting those components. It's a part of being creative and just, meeting the needs of them.
And I would say that experience opens up that creative mind on your side. And the contract might be 10, 12, 30 pages for generics, but there are ways in that contract to specifically show the seller what's different and where the buyer's needs are, and you're trying to find a match there too, I'm sure.
Yes, and one of those big pieces is the as is, right? So it changed, where you used to have to negotiate when you had inspections done, right? You used to have to negotiate to come out. Well, now you can just do the inspection and you don't even have to explain, right? You can just terminate the contract. So I sometimes will put an addendum in there that, just because the seller doesn't want you to nitpick little things like,
plate covers,
I won't give all my secrets away.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's something that you can do. Call me.
Oh, I like that.
There's something that you
Shameless plug. It's okay.
Something that you can do to bypass that. But it's so important for the seller to think that because you don't want to lose time on the market. You don't want somebody to come in and nitpick and just walk away. So there are different things that you can do in an offer to strengthen it. I'll just put it that way. And with where we are in a limited inventory, and prices are ticking down a little bit. So if you're looking to buy, that's promising for you, you're like, well, I have a low interest rate. I don't want to go buy a house that's interest rate price up. Prices are ticking. We're seeing things coming down a little bit. So
yeah, that's a huge point too, because that's a negative, that's a con for the idea of waiting versus doing. And that's a good point to bring up. Yeah. So I got a question for you, Janelle. Are you seeing any trends, because we're talking about that, with the types of houses or projects that are being put up for listings these days?
Oh, absolutely. So we're seeing a lot of investor flipped homes is a term I guess you guys have probably heard a lot. Yeah. So we have a lot of investors are, coming in, buying a house, fixing it up, and putting it back on the market. So one of the things that you really need to be mindful of when you're out there looking at houses is it may be cosmetically beautiful, but an inspection's an important piece to have while you're looking at a home that maybe is one of those. And your realtor can pick up, for the most part, there are a lot of common things that some of the investors are using the same finishes on some of this stuff. So, although it may look beautiful, that home inspection is a really important piece to have, because they're going to get into the bare bones of the house that you don't see with your eye. Also ask your agent, if there are any latent defects noted on the seller's disclosures for the house, because those would be things that, if you're going in on a beautiful sunny day, you don't know that when it rains, it leaks in the bottom corner,
What a great thing.
right? So
What a great
latent
thing.
defects are another piece to that puzzle. We talked about some of the things before, but you know, that might come up. So, you know, those investor flipped homes, you have, just like any profession, you have really great employees and workers, and then you have some that just skim by the bottom
Bare
line,
minimum.
right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you have, don't be turned away just because you walk in and you think, oh, this is a flipped home. I don't, you know, it, because you have phenomenal investors that really truly care about what they do and they do a great job. But then you have some that look great and they're a hot mess. Maybe the HVAC isn't right, or maybe, you know,
But you can't really see with
you
your
can't,
eyes.
yeah, you can't see it, or the ductwork isn't run right, and it's a day like today where you don't really have much heat or air going on, so you don't know what it's pushing out. That's why, you know, your inspector will go in with a gun and see what it's pushing out. So, you know, just to have that inspector in there, you know, but there are so many pieces to this process that you need to put things together. You know, we've got appraisal gaps, we've got escalation clauses, and, you know, you're going to talk about some of those, I think.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on something I didn't even think of until you just said that, is that many people don't realize that Baltimore area itself caused the entire country to have a flip situation like 20 years ago. And I don't even know if you know that.
Yeah.
So when in the lending world, when you say the word flip, that actually means something in our guidelines, and it's within 90 days if the price has changed more than, I think, 15% or something. And that doesn't always coincide with the reality of somebody who just bought it, did great renovations quickly and ready to sell. But FHA buyers, if they buy a home which has been renovated and then resold inside of 90 days, have to have 2 appraisals.
Yeah, we actually, let me talk about that, because I just have one under contract, and we were really specific because you might see or hear FHA seasoned, right? So you can't even take an FHA contract until day 91. And if you're from acquisition, meaning when they bought the home, when the seller bought the home, acquisition to contract, if it's within 180 days and if they make over 100%, because not only can you have a double appraisal, but if it's acquisition to 180 and the profit is over 100, you definitely have to have those too. So,
and it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a deal. It just means that the lens is going to be, zoomed in a little more, and that's not to hurt the buyer. That's to protect you.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said something about that. But, and again, the real estate renovation community, the investors, the flipping, it has a wonderful place in all the communities, because some of the people who want to buy a home, the inventory is so low, they can't afford to buy a home that is not been renovated, and they might want to but can't work it out. The investor comes in, does all that work for them, and of course they add profit, but that's okay because you didn't do it. There's a place for that, but I'm so glad you said that, because you do have to look under the hood, so to speak, because the new granite countertop and the white cabinets, which look beautiful together, are not the story, and I'm so glad you said that. But you teamed me up on something kind of cool. So, you know, we don't want to give away all the trade secrets. You got to call professionals, not Siri and Gemini. But you hinted on 2 things that I think are really great. And the overall reason that you and I are having a conversation is to share with the audience the benefit of having a lender and an agent that really work together. And writing the contract is absolutely an integral process with the buyer, the lender, and of course the agent. If an agent and a lender aren't working together closely, it's not like you can't get a deal done, but you might not have that amazing touch that you mentioned, another listing agent said about your contract. And 2 of the ways you can do that is by educating the buyer on the appraisal gap. This is a really easy thing to explain, but it's hard to kind of work in. An appraisal gap simply means when you are under contract, and as a buyer, when you order the appraisal as a part of your loan process, if that appraisal value, if the appraiser gives you an opinion of the value, which is lower than your sales contract, that is a gap. There is a conversation that can be held between seller and buyer agencies where that is okay, and there's a conversation where it's not okay. It's not about drama, it's just about expectations. But the more we understand where you as a buyer are, what you're comfortable doing, whether you have the money or not, or what you may not have the money to go over a certain thing. Not everybody has an appraisal gap or even needs it. It's just a leveraging technique. And the second thing is an escalation clause. An escalation clause is simply an offer that is presented that has math attached to it where kind of like an eBay, not to diminish the power of it,
An automatic
where
bidder.
automatic bid, your offer goes up. There's certainly an opportunity there for misunderstanding if the lender and the agent are not communicating on where your comfort level is, number one, and number two, where your capacity to actually meet that is. I personally have had an eBay offer where I just did something by accident and I ended up paying $40 more than I wanted to for something, but it was too late at that point.
Yeah.
So now that was a Lego toy for my son for Christmas. It was not the end of the world. However, if that was a $400,000 home and it broke my bank or I was financially obligated to that deposit, it would have been some drama. So I'm so glad you brought that up. But these are really easy things to talk about, but it's important to dig in on each individual buyer's financial picture. So when we talk about these, we say, okay, these are the tools in our toolbox that we can give to Janelle. So that when she goes to make that offer and she talks to the seller, one of her things that she does, it's not really a secret, just makes you special and says, what are you guys looking for? Maybe those tools can attach to themselves to that issue. Maybe not. But if you don't have that conversation or relationship, it could be a missed opportunity and you might not get your offer accepted when in reality you had that perfect tool sitting in your toolbox, but your team didn't know that was ready to use. And that's kind of where I was going with it.
And with that tool, it's won me several, some of my clients, several contracts.
Awesome.
We've won several using that escalation, and it could be as an increment of 500 or 1,000, whatever it might be. And it's one of those things where it's like, what are you willing to pay for the house? This is what I say to the buyer. What are you willing to pay for the house? And they tell me, well, but you don't necessarily want to pay that if you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
So, let's say the house is listed for $325 and they say, well, I would go to $335, but I don't want to. And, the highest bid might be $330 and they got it for $330 and $500. So they didn't go all the way up, but it was enough that we beat out that other offer. And it's just one of those pieces that you tailor it. And, it's a win-win because, the seller gets a little bit more than they would have. And then you get it just by the smidge of that outbid.
And what a cool metaphor about the puzzle. I think that was a home run when you said that, where, the home buying process and the home selling process are two different puzzles, but they will interlock if you have the right team in place. And Janelle's giving you a couple of the techniques that she uses when she's engaging with someone on the other side of the transaction. And it's important you just have those conversations with your agent, hopefully Janelle, about, hey, here's what I can do and what I don't want to do. And she can then figure out what tool in your toolbox to use. That puzzle piece analogy is just huge because if the communication is not where it needs to be, or the agent is not experienced enough to recognize the market trend, which is the purpose of this episode today, they may not know a way to lock those pieces together. But not that I do this to show you, but I'm part Italian, my hands work. So it really does, it comes down to that metaphor though, because what a horrible thing to realize you had a chance to win an offer, but you didn't present it in that way.
Right.
And we all kind of have those stories too. So I really appreciate you coming here today, Janelle. I think that the audience has learned a whole lot, certainly about you, and they won't hold it against you that you're a Hoosier by heart. Who's your NFL team?
Oh, that's tough. And every time I go home, they get mad at me. They say, or if I'm from here, people say you stole the Colts, and I didn't steal anything. But I love football, and I'm going to shout out to my grandmother who is 96, and she still cheers on the Colts ever since they came to Indiana. So, Grandma, love ya.
Listen, if you're from Indiana, it's not your fault, right?
Right.
You guys didn't do anything. And I'm 43. I was like 5 years old when that happened. But, my family still was bitter to the end. We're not mad at your state. We're just mad at the people that were involved and a gentleman named Bob.
Let's put it that way.
Yes.
I love the game.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but thanks for having me. And I'm more than willing to answer any questions that anybody might have. The teacher in me is always looking to reach out and educate. So that's something.
And they say the final phase of learning is to teach. So if you have an agent that can teach you about this process, it usually means there's a competence and experience level to be able to provide that service.
Yeah. And I continue. That's one of the things, I am not as seasoned in the years as some of the agents in the field, but the investors that work with me on a regular basis and the clients that I have can tell you that, I have done my homework and, done what I need to do. And if I would never give a false answer. If I don't know it, I'll learn it before I give you the answer. But
well, that's great. Well, we're going to put her name, phone number, email address, and brokerage name in the description of the YouTube video when it goes up. Please, if you kind of like her vibe and like some of the answers that Janelle provided, reach out to her And then, God willing, if you need to get a home financing, reach out to me. But this is more about education, not really a sales pitch.
Sure.
And I appreciate you being here today and just, hearing that information. It's cool. And again, the funny thing is I've been doing this for 20 years. And when her and I spoke, I did learn about this new document in the contract. I just hadn't seen it yet in some of the contracts that I'd seen since October. And maybe they forgot to put them in there. I don't even know, but I wouldn't even be aware. So we're not too seasoned to stop learning.
Sure.
And it's a great point.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for visiting the World Wide Web of Lending YouTube page and this episode where we learn how to take the harmonization between a lender and agent relationship, provide you a service to the consumer. And then obviously today we're talking about the market trends and insights that this team can give you guys. Appreciate you listening. I hope you enjoyed the beautiful North Point Park. A lot of wonderful tradition in the Baltimore area and the War of 1812. Look it up. I'll put a little ode to the history in the description as well. And I can't wait to see you back on the next episode. Bye.
Have a great day.